Good day and welcome to Reading Support and Literature. I'm Melinda Coffey, and on the screen you can see there's my telephone number if you need to contact me with any questions. The contact times are between 5:30 and 8 on weekdays and 3 and 6 on Saturdays. Just some general notes. Remember that in order for you to fully understand the work and the study guide, you need to go through every study unit. You will have to work through your learning outcomes as well as your learning activities. When you are writing the exam or doing the assignment, remember to answer all of the questions that are asked. The number of marks that are given or indicated will indicate to you that the time of facts that are required, as well as the amount of time that will go into answering the specific question. If you are writing by hand, please remember to write neatly and legibly so that the marker can know what you are writing. It is important that you read your questions very carefully and that you take note of the verb within the question, as that verb will tell you what you need to answer. Okay, so we're moving on to study unit number 1, which is all about the selected theories of the reading process. Now, reading in the fuller sense involves that a learner will have to put together word recognition, comprehension, and do so in a fluent manner. To develop word recognition, the learner needs to be able to know phonemic awareness, alphabetic principles. And now alphabetic principles is when there's the different letters that are put together to form a new sound. So in phonemic awareness, they will just need to know that an A is a A and a B is a B. But for instance, with your alphabetic principles, the learner would have to know that if we have an S and an H, they produce now a completely new sound, as in sh. Then they also need to be able to decode. They also need to be able to do their word study. And then they also need to be able to know sight vocabulary. So these are those short sight words such as the, in, it, is, all of those short sight words that they learn from grade 1. To develop comprehension, the learner needs to be able to have background knowledge about many topics, as this makes reading much easier. They need to have extensive oral and print vocabulary, so both be able to speak and read many words. They need to understand how the English language works. And then they need to also understand how print works, so reading from left to right. Knowledge of various kinds of text would help. Various purposes for reading, so you have purposes. You need to gain more knowledge on a topic, or you need to learn for a class activity, or just reading for fun. And then the last one, strategies for constructing meaning from text. So they need to be able to get the meaning behind the text and use that then to solve problems. When it comes to developing fluency, the learner needs to develop a high level of accuracy in word recognition, maintain a rate of reading briskly through to facilitate comprehension. So they need to be able to read at the appropriate speed. They have to paraphrase and expressions so that oral reading sounds like speech. So they need to be able to put it in their own words, but also be able to use expressions such as the exclamation mark is for speaking louder, or on putting it in a question form when there's a question mark. And then they need to transform deliberate strategies for word recognition and comprehension into automatic skills. So all of the skills that they are taught, they need to be able to use that automatically while they are reading. Now, basically, what is reading? Reading is putting together now the word recognition and the comprehension in a fluid way, and it also involves that children need to be motivated to do so. Okay, so like I just said, motivation is actually a very essential part of the reading process. Children need to be eager and willing to read. They have to have a positive attitude and motivation so that they can have literacy and numeracy skills. There are many ideas that teachers can actually use to motivate learners how to read. Now, these ones that are listed is only a few, there are many more. So there's explanation reading time, there's sharing, there's reading to learners, using fads. When I'm using fads, that is basically things that interest learners. So if you are reading a specific topic, maybe the book is about zoos, you can talk to the kids about all sorts of different animals and not just read the story as it is. Then there's always films and television. A lot of books are put into movie form, and then children are, because they are quite used to the technology these days, you can also introduce them to the films and then encourage them to go watch that. Then you have poetry, inventory and surveys. Now, inventory and surveys that you can do at the beginning of the year just to get to find out what are kids interested in or specific issues that they are struggling with, and then you can base your reading on those issues. There's always book discussion groups and class-created books. So these are books that are put together by the children of various stories or jokes or things that interest them. Okay, so there's many more in the study guide that you can read through. The reading process is a very complex process that occurs throughout a child's development. And you get different stages, such as the first is awareness and exploration of reading stage. Then you have your emergent reading stage, you have early reading stage, transitional reading stage, and lastly your fluent reading stage. So in the first 4 stages, children will get to know letters and sounds, and then the last stage is basically from grade 3 and upwards, where by that time they should be able to read fluently. By then they should be able to put their word recognition and comprehension together. To understand this reading process, a lot of researchers have come up with a few theories and models of reading. And we're going to look at 4 specific ones, which is the traditional theories, the cognitive theories, the hybrid theories, and then the metacognitive theories. So the traditional theories of reading suggest that children or learners usually start with identifying the letters, and then they put them together to form words, and later on they'll put these words together to form sentences. So this is a very bottom-up theory of reading, and it focuses on phonics-based learning, which is basically learning the sounds that letters make in a word. Your cognitive theory contradicts the traditional theory in the sense that it states that a child will first put together the words and the sentences instead of breaking them into the letters. And it's known as a top-down theory. And it believes that at the moment at which individuals understand the process of reading without being entirely familiar with all the discrete components of how to read, such as the individual words, how words fit together, so all of the things that the traditional theory mentions. So it's a more holistic method of learning then. Then your hybrid theories borrows basically from your traditional and your cognitive theory. And it says that everything happens at the same time. So children both learn how to read by using phonemic awareness, so first the sounds, but that also helps them put together the words. And at the same time, they're also forming sentences, so everything happens at the same time. And then your metacognitive theory, it's based more on how the child reacts to this learning process, instead of really looking at the smaller parts of how the child learns how to read. There are quite a number of skills that influences how a learner will learn how to read. This is the phonemic awareness, the alphabetic principle, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. All over the world, we find that children have a number of reading problems, and these reading problems are very often first detected by the parents as they speak and read stories to the children a lot more often, and then the next group of people who will realize there's a reading problem is then the teachers. There are a number of causes to these reading difficulties. The first is dyslexia, which is a brain-based condition, and it is where the letters within a word are not fully grasped by the learner. So it's almost like the words are jumping around and changing shape the entire time that the child will look at this word, making it difficult for the child to get used to the specific letters in a word. And then we have our attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is also a brain-based disorder, usually in childhood, but it can continue through until adult. And it makes it very difficult for the child to stay focused on what they are doing, as well as they have a lot of energy. So sitting still during the reading process might be very difficult for them. You have auditory processing disorder. That makes it difficult for a child to hear the sounds of letters, and then that makes it difficult for them to put together a whole word and to get used to how these letters sound within the different words that they read. Your visual processing issues, it's where the child has difficulty between what they see on a paper and then connecting that in the brain so that they understand what they are seeing. There's quite a number of aims and psychological needs that literature can satisfy for learners. And in the classroom, the literature contributes towards cultural values, expanding horizons, building vocabulary, improving your writing skills, and then teaching critical thinking to the learners. There are 4 different types of reading, and they each have their purpose and their place. You have skimming, scanning, intensive, and extensive reading. With your skimming, it's basically looking over a portion of the article or whatever is being read, and then determining based on that whether it is something to continue with or whether it is of no interest. Scanning is really glancing over the entire piece and then grabbing the keywords to then form together a conclusion of what is going on within this piece that is being read. Intensive reading is really reading to understand and to know what is there. So you read from the beginning to the end. With extensive reading, that is usually just done for fun. So it's reading the entire piece, but at a slower pace and not with the main aim to really comprehend and remember everything that is being read. When it comes to children's literature, there are various different genres, such as picture book, fairy tales, myths, historical fiction, biography, poetry, and drama. There's a whole list, and you can read through all of them in your study guide. Literature plays quite a vital role in the development of children when it comes to their moral values, their gender, and then their sexual identity. With moral values, children often resonate with the characters within a story. So they will really be looking to the characters to see how they handle specific life situations. And often children are going through the same situations in life. That is what draws them towards the character. And then the morals come in where they really look at how does this character deal with the specific issues. And this can be both negative or positive. So if a character deals with life issues in a very negative way, the child will then also learn to deal with their own specific life issues in the same negative way. But if a character deals with life issues in a positive and a good way, and a very healthy way, the child will then follow that and be able to deal with life's issues in also a positive and a healthy way. So your character really teaches the child about how to act and behave morally within the society. The same can be said for gender roles and sexual identity. A lot of times in storybooks, the gender roles, it's very stereotyped, and children look towards then what is being said about how should different genders then act within society, what is expected of them. So, for instance, there will females or girls in a storybook might be depicted as being more nurturing, being soft, being more quiet, whereas then your boys would be depicted as being more active and strong, and you get stereotypes such as boys shouldn't cry and men shouldn't cry, and then based on that, the children then also act in that way. That's where they learn then their specific gender, what is required of them. And this can be true, but often it is not the realistic vision of how gender roles are in society. Okay, so teachers can then also promote gender equity. If they are using a storybook, they can look at specific parts, see how gender roles and sexual identity is depicted in the story, and then they can challenge these. They can challenge the stereotypes of gender within the storybook in ways such as collectively analyzing gender assumptions in the text. So to ask the class, what does it say about boys? What does it say about girls? What is expected of them? They can raise questions about the main characters and their portrayal. So how does the male character, how is he being portrayed? How is the female character being portrayed? Asking learners to reverse the gender of individuals. For instance, in the story, the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty, the teacher can ask, what if Sleeping Beauty was actually a boy instead of a girl? And what if the princess had to come rescue then the prince actually? And they can also have learners guess the writer's gender based on what is being read. So based on what the entire storybook, would they say that the person that wrote the book was a male or was a female? And then what makes them say that? They can also ask learners to use gender-neutral names when they are writing their own essays or their own stories. A name, for instance, such as Sam can either be Samuel a boy or Samantha a girl. Then lastly, teachers can have learners adopt the opposite sex's point of view about a gender issue. So they will ask the girls to put themselves in the shoes of the boys or the boys in the shoes of the girls, depending on the specific gender issue that is being discussed. Literature can then also promote an understanding of the self, of others, and of the world. There are 5 competencies that can emerge as core components of positive youth development. A positive sense of self can come forth, the ability to practice self-control, effective decision-making skills, a moral system of belief, pro-social connectedness. Learners should be prepared for the reading process through the use of some different reading readiness activities. There are about 7 of them. The first is visual perception activities. There's also your visual discrimination activities, form constancy. So this is the ability to find a different form in a series of forms. So if you have a bunch of triangles all pointing upwards, there will be one that points down. You have visual memory, so remembering things that were seen. Sequential memory, that is remembering anything that is in a sequence. Visual spatial relations. And then the last one is figure ground. So this is the ability to locate different shapes and different objects in quite a busy visual picture. So for instance, if it's a picture about a busy classroom, they need to find the pencil within that picture. Multimodal text is something that is coming up a lot more, and this is basically using different forms of text. So children these days are used to a lot of different technology. So using just books and magazines and newspapers, just those printed forms of text, it doesn't really motivate learners anymore. It doesn't encourage them and make them want to participate. So what teachers need to be able to do is to bring in different forms of text, such as also your non-printed forms. Now these can be like audio recordings, videos, can be posters. So it's not just about really what children can read, but it's also about engaging different ways of technology within your lesson plan. This brings us to the point of visual literacy, which is the ability to interpret, analyze, and make meaning from information that is presented in a form or in an image. Okay. Now, when you're teaching reading, it's not just about grabbing a book, sitting down with the kids and reading to them. A teacher needs to create a whole lesson plan. It's quite an important skill that needs to be learned. A reading lesson plan focuses on specific skills that children need to learn in able to read then with ease and with fluency in the end of the day. So a dry, typical lesson can be completely transformed if you actually plan ahead of time, and you can include games, you can include activities that the kids can take part in to learn all about a specific topic. It doesn't have to be just the normal routine stuff anymore. Why is it important, or what should you look for in a good reading lesson plan? A good reading lesson plan really needs to have kids interact. It needs to be a pleasurable experience for children, not just a boring thing or something that they won't remember. So you need to look for activities, you need to look for discussions on specific topics that they can read about. You need to look for ways that children are being drawn into the lesson, so a lot of interaction. Okay, you have reading comprehension and retention is two very important skills when it comes to reading. Comprehension is the understanding and interpretation of what is being read. And in order for learners to accurately understand the written material, they need to be able to decode what is being read. They need to make connections between what they are reading and information that they already know. And then they have to think deeply about what they are reading, really comprehend what's behind the story. So we're going to jump to how retention can be developed. It can be developed through explicit and varied teaching, reading retention strategies, questioning, asking a lot of questions. The kids can ask each other, the teacher can ask the children, vocabulary instruction, monitoring, summarizing, focus and attention, and the role of motivation then in fostering reading retention. So children need to be motivated a lot in order for them to really buy into reading and remembering what they are reading about. One type of reading that can take place is silent reading. It's important that children learn how to be able to sit and read silently on their own, and not just always in a group situation or where the teacher reads to them. For silent reading to take place, teachers can prepare them in the following ways. Pace the reading. This means that a small child will not be able to sit still for half an hour reading silently on their own. So it's introduced in short amounts of time, maybe 5 minutes first, and then the time can become longer as the child then grows older. Teachers need to make it engaging, so children cannot just sit still and read silently and then nothing happens after that. You need to engage them. You need to let them ask each other questions, tell each other what they read, and in this way they find the value behind silent reading. Teachers can make it relevant by connecting what they have read to their everyday life. You can also important part actually is to manage the reading. It's important that the teacher walks through the class as they are reading silently to make sure that the learners are actually reading. Usually when learners in the senior primary phase struggle with reading difficulties, it is because there's a lack of a specific skill. The skills that they need to have is decoding, comprehension, and retention. So your decoding is then being able to decode the sound that the different letters make in a word. Comprehension is really understanding what it is that they have just read. So after the decoding takes place, they have to understand still the meaning behind the words. And then retention is laying down what they have read. So this is where memory comes in. With the decoding, the comprehension, and the retention, there's specific signs that a teacher can look for to see whether the child has a problem with which one of these specific skills. And you can read through those signs. They are all in the study guide. Standardized tests is this. We are now already at study unit 4. Standardized test is any form of a test that is either where the students are required to also answer the same questions or questions from a specific group or set of questions and in the same way. Or then the other one is where they are scored based on how they are performing. So it can be either an individual learner or a group of learners scored based on their specific performance. The most common forms of standardized tests are achievement tests, international comparison tests, and the psychological test. There's been quite a lot of controversy around how useful standardized tests for reading are and whether it even should still be used or not used. And usually when these questions arise, it is not really about whether testing in itself is good or bad, but more the use of these tests. You will see in your study guide that these testing can be quite problematic. There's a list of why this is, such as test findings are often inconsistent. Some of the tests are a bit outdated. They've been used for years and years, and forgetting that the children have progressed in the way that they are learning. People have identified learning difficulties, so there's a lot of things that have changed since the time that this specific test might have been set up. Then the question about what is being measured comes in. Tests are not usually a straightforward thing. So the question is, what exactly are you testing? What are you looking for? Because not all children develop in the same way. Not all children have interest in exactly the same things. So they might do good in one area, bad in another area, but it doesn't mean that they do not know what is going on or they don't have the specific skills. Then also a test call on knowledge and social attitudes, which are part of cultural and social experiences. And for this reason, it's very difficult to use standardized tests that were set up overseas or even sometimes in South Africa, because our cultural groups and the way that our society reacts is different to the way that those cultures in society react. So what is standard for them is not standard for a Namibian child, making it very difficult to interpret the answers or the scores of these tests. So the question is whether it is even worth testing. And the answer is that, the testing still needs to take place. It's not whether tests are good or bad. It's just what are you going to use it for. And then also standardized tests, they are very good if they are used for making specific, looking at support for specific children, or determining specific reading difficulties or learning disabilities. So they do still have their place in society. There are multiple ways in which learners can be supported based on the learning difficulties or reading difficulties that they face. What a teacher can do is make instructions more explicit, provide systematic instructions, increase opportunity for practicing, apply skills and strategies in meaningful text. There are also various ways in which a teacher can offer specific support in areas such as stammering, rhythm difficulty, intonation, and vocabulary. You can read up about the specific support that can be offered by teachers in your study guide. This is a very important piece of information. There are different ways in which digital video cameras or sound recorders can be used in a class situation to actually improve your teaching. The digital video camera has a specific place. It can be used for learners to, instead of writing down their thoughts, they can record their thoughts. They can make a video. They can make videos of their summaries. They can, for instance, if say you have a science project, they can record how a plant grows over a period of time. And then you can also ask them to do weekly or monthly newscast. So they can put together a video of what have they learned, what has happened at school, what is going on. These are all ways to draw in and motivate learners because they are very used to technology, and the learning also has to evolve to include that within your classroom. And audio recorders can also help children in various ways, especially your auditory learners who really learn and remember best when they listen to things instead of just reading through it. So the 4 ways in which your audio recording can boost learning is brainstorming. When learners sit together and they are working on a project, they can record the brainstorming session instead of wasting time writing down the notes and worrying about spelling and grammar. They can just spend time discussing and then later on listen to the recording. Refining voice. When children listen to audio recordings, they hear a specific tone of voice, and then this shows them how should it sound like when a question is being answered, when a statement is being made, and then they can practice also on their own so that when they read, it just goes smoother. For practice and revision, learners can also record themselves, reading out loud through a piece of information that they need to study, and then they can play that back as a form of a summary. They can listen to it and then they learn in that way. The last one is self-assessment, whereby learners can self-assess and reflect on their own strengths and challenges by recording their thoughts instead of writing. Often children do not want to write because they have a fear of their thoughts being discredited or them not writing the stuff right, and then they have to erase it or they have to scratch through it and start all over. Whereas with a recording, you can just record over what you have said, you can make changes, they can better also explain themselves on a specific point. So that brings us to the end of our study units. I wish you all the best with your exams and with the rest of the year.